PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media here in the sports and entertainment capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. Follow the network at PRConnectionsRadio.com. Check out the schedule and all the shows we have here on the network, including Vegas Hockey Hub, Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday. We also have a website, PRConnectionsRadio.com, so you have all the hosts. You can go on and see all the shows that are on here. Fantastic content, so PRConnectionsRadio.com. For everybody on YouTube, go to their YouTube channel, PR Connections Radio. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so not miss any episode or any show that is on PRConnectionsRadio.com. And if you are on the Vegas Hockey Hub YouTube channel, I say welcome. Also like our channel and subscribe. That would be fantastic. And if you could share our video, that would be amazing, as we have done over 200 episodes here on Vegas Hockey Hub, and it has been a great journey. And if you want to follow the show on social media, regardless if it is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, whatever site you have, it is at Vegas Hockey Hub, and follow your host at Ian Rickelli 18. So on today's episode, we are going to be discussing Zach Whitecloud. And Zach Whitecloud, really good defenseman. This guy has really become into his own as a Vegas Golden Knight. And yeah, you can see him in college right there, but you can also see him as a Stanley Cup champion right here. You can see the fact that he had the Stanley Cup raised above his head in June of 2023 as the Vegas Golden Knights, your Vegas Golden Knights, won a Stanley Cup championship. But let's get to Zach Whitecloud. Let's get into who he actually is. As you can see right here, he has played a little under 200 career NHL games. He has played all 4 seasons here in Vegas for your Vegas Golden Knights. He has had 44 points, and you know what? For a guy who is on the 3rd defensive pairing alongside Nick Holden, alongside Nick Hague, as someone who has done pretty well on the 3rd pair, 44 points is not bad for a young defenseman in Zach Whitecloud. But you have to ask yourself an important question about Zach Whitecloud. Who is Zach Whitecloud? What makes Zach Whitecloud so special for your Vegas Golden Knights? Where did Zach Whitecloud come from? And how did he get to the Vegas Golden Knights? Those are all important questions when you're talking about who Zach Whitecloud is. So in order to do that, we have to go all the way back to the beginning when he played for Bemidji State, and that is in college hockey, NCAA. And this guy played 2 whole seasons in Bemidji State. And anybody who wants to know where that is, just go to Google, type it in, and it is absolutely going to be up there for you. Now, when it comes to Zach Whitecloud, the one thing I will give him a lot of credit for is that he showed early on that he can be a good, productive player in hockey. It didn't matter if it was in college hockey, regardless of where he was at the beginning of his career. He showed that he could be a solid, productive presence in the NHL. He could be a good, solid player, not just in the locker room, but on the ice as well. That all 200 feet of that rink he could use to his advantage. And his stats in college hockey, 7 goals, 29 assists, 36 points, and 49 penalty minutes in 77 games played. Now, I will mention the penalty minutes because later on in the show, I'm going to kind of reflect on the fact that Zach Whitecloud, he has his teammates back. One positive trait Zach Whitecloud has is the fact that he is willing to stand up for his teammates. He has his teammates back, and he will protect his teammates at time. And that definitely was shown in college, the AHL, Team Canada, and with your Vegas Golden Knights. So after doing pretty well in 2 seasons for Bemidji State, he gets signed to your Vegas Golden Knights. And I do have to quickly mention that he was invited to the LA Kings developmental camp in 2017 before signing an entry-level deal with your Vegas Golden Knights in March of 2018. I also want to mention for Zach Whitecloud the fact that he had a very good tape, a good audition for your Vegas Golden Knights. He showed in college the type of skill set he would have in the NHL, the type of move set he would have moving forward in the NHL. In fact, he did so well that he actually was selected to Team Canada in 2017. And in fact, he was the youngest player on that roster back in 2017 for Team Canada. So if that doesn't show you how good he was as a 17, 18, 19-year-old, the fact that this guy could be the youngest member, the youngest player on the roster for Team Canada back in 2017, it showed a bright future. And the fact that the Vegas Golden Knights, an expansion team at the time, got this young, decorated college free agent in Zach Whitecloud is vital. But let me ask you this question. Why did Vegas, out of all teams, get Zach Whitecloud? Why did Zach Whitecloud sign a 3-year entry-level contract with your Vegas Golden Knights? What was the connection with him? Well, to give you the context, Zach Whitecloud is from Brandon, Manitoba. And Brandon, for anyone who's a longtime listener of the show, you might pick up on immediately where I'm going with this. Brandon Wheat Kings are a team in the Western Hockey League. In fact, he played for the midget level team in Brandon, Manitoba. In fact, his family had a connection to the Brandon Wheat Kings of the WHL. And who happened to own the Brandon Wheat Kings? Who happened to be the head coach of the Brandon Wheat Kings? That's right, current Vegas Golden Knights general manager, Kelly McCrimmon. So that's the connection between Zach Whitecloud and the Vegas Golden Knights. It's the fact that Brandon Wheat Kings and Brandon, Manitoba, Zach Whitecloud is from there. His family had a connection to the Brandon Wheat Kings. That's why Kelly McCrimmon went out and got Zach Whitecloud. So that's the connection there. Very vital connection is the fact that he came from Brandon, Manitoba. Now, Zach Whitecloud, after being signed to the Vegas Golden Knights, given that entry-level deal, he actually made his NHL debut 1 month later against the Edmonton Oilers. And not only did he have an impressive +3 for your Vegas Golden Knights in that game, but Zach Whitecloud actually played some time, actually played about 16 minutes in that game for the Vegas Golden Knights. So for the fact that you get signed in March and you have your NHL debut in April, that's definitely a good accomplishment and had some good potential for your Vegas Golden Knights. Now, after this, Zach Whitecloud, he would go to the training camp in 2018. He would be part of the rookie roster for the 2018-2019 season. And after having a good training camp and a solid development camp for your Vegas Golden Knights, Zach Whitecloud would then be optioned down to the Chicago Wolves of the AHL, the AAA affiliate of your Vegas Golden Knights at the time. And Zach Whitecloud, in 2 seasons playing in Chicago, he actually did pretty well. As Zach Whitecloud, in his 2 seasons, 2018-2019, 2019-2020, he had 109 games played, 8 goals, 27 points, and a 35 points. Now, I also want to point out for Zach Whitecloud, he had a +30 in Chicago. So in terms of plus minus, he had a +30 on the defensive end. So for a guy like Zach Whitecloud, who is barely 22, 23 years old, this is a guy in Zach Whitecloud who's showing at a young stage in his career that he can be a good defensive-minded player. In fact, his defensive metrics was the best quality about Zach Whitecloud as he was heading into the AHL. And actually is what got him promoted to the NHL towards the end of the 2020 NHL season. His defensive ability is among the best on the Golden Knights roster. He is solid defensively. And I will mention with Zach Whitecloud that when he did get promoted and he eventually got his opportunity here in Vegas, he took all of the advantage of it. He actually did well enough in his first season. So as he was teamed up with Nick Holden, him being on the third pair where he has been for the last 4 seasons, he also was in the playoffs for Vegas and spent all 20 games that year in the playoffs. He was not taken out. He wasn't a healthy scratch or anything. No, he played all 20 playoff games in the 2020 postseason. Now, what I also want to mention with Zach Whitecloud is that, yes, there was the incident that happened in the Western Conference Finals. It was a play that unfortunately put Zach Whitecloud in an unfortunate situation. In the game-deciding Western Conference Finals against the Dallas Stars in 2020, Zach Whitecloud took a time-costly penalty that eventually allowed Dallas to be on the power play and score the game-winning goal, and they would advance to the Stanley Cup Finals and lose against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, no one was going to blame Zach Whitecloud for this. All right, it's a penalty. It could happen to anybody. But it was always unfortunate that this guy, who was in his second season playing professional hockey, 2019, 2020, he's still a young defenseman. He was a young up-and-coming guy. And the fact that he had that happen to him, I know that there was some confidence that probably was shaken in that moment. The fact that this young defenseman took this penalty at the wrong place at the wrong time, and it affected the Vegas Golden Knights. So in 2019, 2020, if you include his AHL stats and his NHL stats, not only did he have 16 games played in the NHL, but Zach Whitecloud in 2018, 2019, he had a total of 54 games between the AHL and the NHL. And during that time, he had 8 points, 2 of them being goals. He also had a +6, which once again shows defensively he has been a good member of your Vegas Golden Knights. In fact, he has rarely ever had a negative plus-minus for Vegas. Now, I will mention that, yes, he had 52 penalty minutes in 2018-2019 with the Chicago Wolves. And he had 22 penalty minutes in 2019-2020 during that season. So, after spending a split season in Chicago and in Vegas, Zach Whitecloud finally gets an opportunity. And in 2020, 2021, he got a chance to play on an everyday basis for your Vegas Golden Knights. And Zach Whitecloud did exceptionally well. Zach Whitecloud in 2020, 2021, and in 2021, 2022, he was improving as a player. He was getting better as a member of your Vegas Golden Knights. And I also am going to point out, when it comes to Zach Whitecloud, you could tell that he was getting more confident on air. You could tell that he was getting more confident on the ice with your Vegas Golden Knights. And his statistics those 2 years and those back-to-back seasons where he played 51 out of 56 games that year and played 59 games in 2021, 2022, Zach Whitecloud had a whopping 10 goals for your Vegas Golden Knights. He also had 31 points during that time. And I also have to mention 44 penalty minutes. Once again, he sticks up for his teammates. He is someone who's willing to commit to being a team player here in Vegas. And during the playoffs, he also ended up being a good member for your Vegas Golden Knights. Because in those 2 years, he had 19 career playoff games. He had 1 goal, 4 points, and he had about 16 penalty minutes for your Vegas Golden Knights. But what was also shown is the fact that Zach Whitecloud, dependable, reliable, and keep in mind, at this point, he was 24 years old for your Vegas Golden Knights. So this is a young defenseman. This is one of the youngest defensemen the Vegas Golden Knights had. And how did they reward Zach Whitecloud? How was Zach Whitecloud rewarded for being a young 24-year-old who is getting better every single year in Vegas? Well, he got rewarded with a 6-year contract extension. He was rewarded for how much better he was getting as a defenseman, as he got a whopping 6-year deal, $16 million, which means that until 2028, Zach Whitecloud will be a member of your Vegas Golden Knights. And I also will mention, by the way, that this is a guy who, a guy in Zach Whitecloud, something that he did, by the way, a lot of people did not mention, is the fact that, yes, he got that 6-year contract, but he was also invited to Team Canada for the World Championship in 2022. And yes, I know Canada did not win. They had the silver medal. But the fact that Zach Whitecloud at 24 years old is playing for Team Canada in the World Championship, and the fact that he played all 10 games and even had 4 points for Team Canada, he did pretty well during that time period. So as we are talking about Zach Whitecloud, as we're discussing what Zach Whitecloud has become for your Vegas Golden Knights, I also have to mention that this is a guy that in the 2019 Calder Cup playoffs, I mean, this is a guy who had a whopping 15 points and was the most points by a rookie defenseman since Alex Gogowski had it in 2008. I mean, this is a guy who, Zach Whitecloud, had 15 points in 22 playoff games in 2018-2019. There's something I forgot to mention about that, because even then, at 20 years old, he was showing. Now, I'm going to answer this question very quickly by mentioning this. Zach Whitecloud is still here because of how young he was. It was a rookie mistake. Zach Whitecloud was not punished for making a rookie mistake because he was 21 years old. Marc-Andre Fleury, when he made his mistake, he was a 16-year veteran at that point. Marc-Andre Fleury was not a 21-year-old who was barely on the roster. Zach Whitecloud was. So I think Zach Whitecloud was given the benefit of the doubt because he was a young, up-and-coming 21-year-old, not an established 35-year-old veteran. That's my take on that. So as we are continuing our conversation here about Zach Whitecloud on Vegas Hockey Hub, I mean, Zach Whitecloud has improved, has gotten better. In fact, his last 2 seasons here in Vegas, he has had 13 goals, 18 points, 31 assists with a plus 31, and 61 penalty minutes in 118 games. Once again, 13 goals, 18 assists, 31 points with a plus 31 and 61 penalty minutes. Zach Whitecloud has done exceptionally well for the Vegas Golden Knights. He has done a good job here in Vegas. And I'm happy that he has finally gotten established. I'm finally that at 26 years old, Zach Whitecloud has finally become the reliable, stable asset on the third line for Vegas. In fact, he has done pretty well at making excellent plays for the Vegas Golden Knights. As a matter of fact, Zach Whitecloud made history as he would become the second defenseman in the modern era to score the game-winning goal in the opening game of the final. Okay? He is the second guy to do that, to score the game-winning goal as a defenseman in the opening game of the final, Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals. Zach Whitecloud, the second ever defenseman in the modern era to score the game-winning goal in the opening game. I also have to mention that when it comes to Zach Whitecloud, he has been getting more confident and he's been getting better with Vegas, and I give him a lot of credit. Now, his playoff stats in Vegas have been exceptional as well. I mean, he has had 15 career playoff points here in Vegas. He has had a whopping plus 18 and over 40 penalty minutes in 61 career playoff games for your Vegas Golden Knights. And 61 of those playoff games, I have to mention, 6 of them have been in critical moments. They have been in game-defining moments for your Vegas Golden Knights. And he finished all this off by winning the most prestigious award in the NHL. He won the Stanley Cup for your Vegas Golden Knights. So a question really needs to be asked about Zach Whitecloud. His current contract right now is $2.75 million over the next 5 seasons with your Vegas Golden Knights. So if you're Zach Whitecloud, if you're the Vegas Golden Knights, you need to ask yourself a valuable question. Where do you see Zach Whitecloud going from this point forward? Because he is 26 years old. He will be with Vegas until he is 30 years old as a Golden Knight. Do you see Zach Whitecloud progressing to being a second-line defenseman? Do you see a possibility that Zach Whitecloud could eventually replace a veteran defenseman, Alec Martinez? Could he replace a veteran defenseman in Brayden McNabb? Is Zach Whitecloud going to eventually become what Shea Theodore has been as a steady hand on the second line? Who knows? Maybe 5 years from now, Zach Whitecloud and Shea Theodore are the 2 defensemen on the first line. You never know. The NHL is crazy. Stuff like that can happen. Would Haig and Whitecloud eventually become the duo that's on the second line here in Vegas? There's a lot of what ifs and a lot of scenarios you could play out with Zach Whitecloud here in Vegas. But here's what we do know. What we do know is about Zach Whitecloud is the fact that he has been in Vegas for 4 years. Zach Whitecloud, what we do know is that his 4 seasons being in Vegas, he has been one of the most steady guys you can have. He doesn't miss a lot of games in Vegas. So for Zach Whitecloud, considering what he can do, I like his potential. I like what he can do moving forward. And the question that really needs to be asked by the Vegas Golden Knights is, can Zach Whitecloud be a constant for the next 5 years? Can Zach Whitecloud be alongside Nick Hague as a prominent force in Vegas for the next 5 years? My answer is yes. What does Zach Whitecloud need to work on to become a better defenseman? I'll be honest, I don't see much outside of putting more pucks in the back of the net. I mean, I understand Zach Whitecloud. This is a guy who has had only a few goals in Vegas over the last couple of years. But I've always said that when it comes to defensemen, it doesn't really matter how many goals you put in the back of the net. It matters what your plus minus is. It matters what your time on ice is. Whitecloud will only get better with age and experience. There are a lot of older players that have lots of experience and will learn from playing with them. Yes, you're talking about the mentorship, Martinez, and with Pietrangelo. I can see that. I definitely could see a possibility where that does happen. And I will mention with Zach Whitecloud, as we're starting to wrap up the show here, Zach Whitecloud is really becoming a good member in the locker room. And I will not be surprised if Zach Whitecloud over the next 5 years becomes a middle pair defenseman in Vegas. I don't think Zach Whitecloud, I don't think his ceiling is that he is going to be a third pairing defenseman his entire career. But let's say for argument's sake, he is. Let's say, for argument's sake, Zach Whitecloud stays as a third pairing defenseman in Vegas. Well, he would be one of the best third pairing defensemen in the NHL. He would become one of the best guys you can have in the locker room. So regardless of what happens with Zach Whitecloud, regardless of what happens with him, my argument to you is going to be the fact that Zach Whitecloud in 4 years has already made himself an established guy in Vegas. He has already become a good upcoming guy in Vegas. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say he'll become the alternate captain, because the alternate captain normally comes to an established veteran in the NHL. Braden McNabb is an established guy. Riley Smith was an established guy. Alex Pietrangelo is an established guy. Normally, a captain goes to someone who has been in the league and someone who has been in the NHL for years by that point. So maybe by the time he's in his late 20s, that could be a possibility. But I think at this current time, Zach Whitecloud is not going to be that guy. So as we are starting to wrap this up, as we are talking about Zach Whitecloud here on Vegas Hockey Hub, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. I'm going to leave you with this. Zach Whitecloud, 15 goals, 44 points, and a plus 46 in his career. Absolutely incredible. I have a lot of high expectations for Zach Whitecloud heading into next year. And I'm going to say when it comes to Zach Whitecloud, I see him being in Vegas. You know what? I think next year he'll have about 4 goals, probably about 15 assists for 19 points. I think that Zach Whitecloud will have similar to what he did 2 or 3 years ago. He will have less goals, but more assists here in Vegas. And I think that he will have 19 points. He will have about a plus 12. And I say about 24 penalty minutes for the Vegas Golden Knights. That is my prediction for Zach Whitecloud. I say for Zach Whitecloud, he will play in 72 games. He will have 4 goals, 15 assists, 19 points, and a plus 12 with 24 penalty minutes. That is my prediction for Zach Whitecloud. So for all the people watching around the world, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and turn notification bell on all YouTube channels to not miss any episode of Vegas Hockey Hub. For all the people on PR Connections Radio, go like all of the content we have on there. We have about 14 shows on PR Connections Radio, this show included. And I will also say to everybody watching around the world, don't forget to go to our social medias, follow and like. We put out content every single day on our social media platforms. And for all audio listeners, iHeartRadio and Spotify and all platforms, we share it too. Don't forget to download the shows and subscribe to the network. And we definitely appreciate that. And until next time, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. And I will say, continue watching hockey, go support junior hockey, and go Knights, go!
PR Connections Radio presents